Question 1. How is the default domain name assigned to a new Microsoft Entra tenant? Select one answer. A. Based on the Azure subscription region. B. Randomly generated by Microsoft and can't be changed. C. Derived from your Microsoft account or input and uses the .onmicrosoft.com suffix. D. Based on the first application registered in the directory. The correct answer is C. Now I'm going to explain how we arrived at this answer. The default domain for a new Microsoft Entra tenant is created using a prefix that comes either from your Microsoft account name or the value you provide during setup, and consequently, it always ends with the .onmicrosoft.com suffix. This approach ensures every tenant begins with a unique and functional domain without requiring custom domains at the start. Furthermore, it is not tied to the Azure subscription region, since geographic placement has no influence on how the domain name is generated. Additionally, it is not randomly generated in a way that prevents changes, because administrators can add their own custom domain names later if needed. Likewise, it is not based on the first application registered in the directory, since applications have no role in determining the tenant's default DNS structure. Question 2. Fill in the blanks by selecting the correct options from the drop-down menus. The Microsoft Entra schema is extensible, allowing changes that are reversible, unlike the rigid schema used in Active Directory domain services. Now I'm going to explain how we arrived at these answers. The Microsoft Entra schema is described as extensible because administrators can add custom attributes to support evolving identity requirements without restructuring the entire directory. Additionally, these modifications are reversible, meaning you can remove or roll back added extensions, which provides flexibility when business needs change. Furthermore, this behavior stands in clear contrast to Active Directory domain services, where schema extensions are permanent and extremely difficult to undo, often requiring meticulous planning to avoid long-term issues. Consequently, Entra's extensible and reversible approach offers a more modern and adaptable identity management experience compared to the rigidity of on-premises ADDS. Question 3. For each statement below, indicate whether it is true or false. You can assign a custom domain to a Microsoft Entra tenant. Microsoft Entra ID uses application proxies to control access to on-prem apps. True. Only hybrid environments can use Microsoft Entra domain services. False. The Microsoft Entra schema includes both device and computer classes. False. Now I'm going to explain how we arrived at these answers. You can assign a custom domain to an Entra tenant because organizations often replace the default onmicrosoft.com domain with their branded domain for identity and authentication purposes. Additionally, Entra ID does use application proxy to provide secure access to on-premises applications by routing authentication through the cloud, which extends modern identity to legacy environments. However, the idea that only hybrid environments can use Microsoft Entra domain services is incorrect, since cloud-only organizations can also deploy it without relying on on-premises Active Directory. Finally, the Entra schema includes the device class but omits the traditional computer class found in on-prem ADDS, meaning the last statement is false. Question 4. For each statement below, indicate whether the answer is true or false. A service administrator is the same as a global administrator in Microsoft Entra ID. False. Microsoft Entra security groups are mail-enabled. False. When users are deleted from on-premises ADDS, they are also deleted in Microsoft Entra ID. True. Licenses are automatically unassigned when a user is disabled in ADDS. False. Now I'm going to explain how we arrived at these answers. First, a service administrator is not the same as a global administrator because each role has different permission levels and responsibilities, so the statement is false. Additionally, Microsoft Entra security groups are used mainly for access control and are not mail-enabled, whereas Microsoft 365 groups are designed for email and collaboration, which makes the second statement false as well. Furthermore, when directory synchronization is enabled, deleting a user in on-premises Active Directory domain services sends that deletion up to Microsoft Entra ID, So the third statement is true since the cloud account is removed too. However, disabling a user in ADDS does not automatically unassign their licenses in Microsoft Entra ID, meaning administrators still need to manage licenses separately, and consequently the final statement is false. Question 5. Which feature of Windows Enterprise allows IT admins to restrict user access to only a specific set of tasks or apps? Select one answer. A. Assigned access. B. Enterprise data protection. C. Group policy. D. Granular UI control. The correct answer is D. Granular UI control. Now I'm going to walk you through why this option is the right choice. Granular UI control is designed to let administrators limit what users can interact with on the Windows interface, ensuring they perform only approved tasks without navigating the wider system. Moreover, assigned access is far more limited because it only locks a user into a single application in kiosk mode rather than supporting a controlled set of tasks. In addition, enterprise data protection focuses on safeguarding information by preventing data leakage, but it does not manipulate UI elements or app accessibility. Similarly, although group policy provides powerful configuration controls across Windows environments, it lacks the fine-tuned interface restriction capabilities found in granular UI control. Question 6. Match each Windows version to its corresponding minimum hardware requirement in the correct match column. Each item may be used once, more than once, or not at all. Requires TPM 2.0 and UEFI with Secure Boot. Windows 11 requires at least 1 GB RAM, 32-bit, or 2 GB RAM, 64-bit. Windows 10 requires a 720p display of 9-inch or greater. Windows 11 requires a minimum of 64 GB storage. Windows 11 requires a graphics card with DirectX 9 and WDDM 1.0. Windows 10. Now let me clarify how these matches were determined. Windows 11 appears multiple times because it depends heavily on modern hardware standards, including TPM 2.0, Secure Boot, and updated display requirements, which collectively position it as a security-focused operating system. Additionally, the minimum storage requirement of 64 GB also aligns with Windows 11's push towards supporting more capable devices. Meanwhile, Windows 10 is matched with the RAM and graphics requirements because it was built to support a wide range of legacy and modern hardware, meaning 1 GB or 2 GB RAM and DirectX 9 with WDDM 1.0 are sufficient for installation. In contrast, Windows 7 and Windows 8.1 are not used because their hardware needs do not align with the items listed in this question. Question 7. For each Microsoft Entra concept, drag it to the appropriate description in the correct match column. Each item may be used once, more than once, or not at all. Offers cloud-based directory services with Microsoft Management. Microsoft Entra ID. Supports features like multi-factor authentication and identity protection. Premium Entra features. Automatically included in Microsoft 365 and Microsoft Intune subscriptions. Free tier. Microsoft Entra. Default domain name includes a unique prefix followed by onmicrosoft.com. Default domain naming allows resource access control via RBAC within a subscription. Azure RBAC integration. Now let me walk you through the reasoning behind these matches. Microsoft Entra ID aligns with the description of cloud-based directory services because it delivers identity and directory capabilities directly from the cloud rather than relying on traditional on-premises infrastructure. Furthermore, Premium Entra features correspond to advanced capabilities like MFA and identity protection, which extends security and compliance beyond the basic tier. In addition, free-tier Microsoft Entra is included automatically when organizations subscribe to services like Microsoft 365 or Intune, making it the natural match for that statement. To clarify, default domain naming fits the description of a domain using a unique prefix followed by onmicrosoft.com, which is generated whenever a tenant is created. Lastly, Azure RBAC integration is the correct match for resource access control, as Azure depends on Entra ID identities and roles to enforce permissions at the subscription and resource levels. Question 8. What is a benefit of deploying domain controllers in Azure instead of using a VPN connection for authentication? Select one answer. A. It prevents replication traffic from crossing the VPN. B. It ensures domain admins can manage Azure storage accounts. C. It avoids the need to install Microsoft Entra Connect. D. It enables SAML authentication natively. The correct answer is A. It prevents replication traffic from crossing the VPN. Now let's break down why this is the correct choice. Placing domain controllers directly in Azure keeps authentication local to the cloud environment, which means replication traffic stays within Azure rather than traveling across a VPN tunnel. Moreover, this reduces latency and prevents unnecessary load on the VPN connection, improving both performance and reliability. In contrast, domain controllers do not manage Azure storage accounts, so option B does not apply. Additionally, Microsoft Entra Connect is still required when syncing on-prem ADDS to Entra ID, meaning option C is incorrect. Finally, SAML authentication is handled by Microsoft Entra ID, not by domain controllers running on Azure virtual machines, so option D is also invalid. Question 9. What type of account is recommended for managing a Microsoft Entra tenant? Select one answer. A. Microsoft account. B. Local admin account. C. Service principal account. D. Organizational account. The correct answer is D. Organizational account. Now let me explain why this is the preferred option. An organizational account is recommended because it keeps authentication consistent across Microsoft Entra services and avoids mixing personal and corporate identity models, which simplifies administration. Moreover, using a Microsoft account can introduce confusion since it follows a different authentication model that isn't ideal for enterprise tenant management. Additionally, local admin accounts are not used for cloud tenant administration as they exist solely on individual devices and provide no identity within Microsoft Entra. Finally, service principal accounts are designed for applications and automation scenarios rather than human administrative access, making them unsuitable for tenant management. Question 10. Fill in the blanks by selecting the correct options from the drop-down menus. To enable Microsoft Entra Join, the device registration service must be active. If your tenant is federated, your identity provider must support WS-Fed and WS-Trust. Now I'll walk you through why each selected option is correct. The device registration service is essential because it handles the process that allows devices to join Microsoft Entra, making it the foundational component for device onboarding. Furthermore, the requirement for a federated tenant is tied to how authentication is routed, since federated environments depend on an external identity provider rather than Microsoft Entra handling authentication directly. In addition to that, WS-Fed and WS-Trust are the protocols required to complete device join and sign-in operations in a federated setup, ensuring the identity provider can communicate properly with Microsoft Entra during the join workflow. Question 11. Which two actions can be performed on a device from the Configuration Manager console? Select two answers. A. Review hardware and software inventory for the device. B. Create an Azure Virtual Desktop session. C. Install the Configuration Manager client. D. Enable Windows Hello for Business from Intune. E. Retrieve the latest client policy from the server. The correct answers are A. Review hardware and software inventory for the device. And E. Retrieve the latest client policy from the server. Now let's go through why these two options are the correct choices. Reviewing hardware and software inventory is a native function within the Configuration Manager console, allowing administrators to explore device details through Resource Explorer for troubleshooting and reporting. Additionally, retrieving the latest client policy can be triggered using the Start Policy Retrieval action, which forces the client to check in with the server and update its configuration more quickly. On the other hand, creating an Azure Virtual Desktop session is not part of Configuration Manager's capabilities, as that function belongs to the Azure Virtual Desktop environment. Likewise, installing the Configuration Manager client is handled as a deployment task rather than a right-click device action from the console. Finally, enabling Windows Hello for Business is an Intune-specific capability, not one managed from Configuration Manager. Question 12. For each statement below, indicate whether the answer is true or false. The Intune Admin Center is now located at intune.microsoft.com. True. The company portal allows end users to enroll devices and access apps. True. The protect phase involves device registration with Intune. Selective wipe deletes both personal and corporate data. False. Now I'll explain why each statement is classified this way. The Intune Admin Center statement is true because Microsoft now centralizes all Intune management at the intune.microsoft.com portal, which replaced earlier admin experiences. Similarly, the company portal provides the interface for users to enroll their devices and access organizational applications, so that statement is also true. However, the protect phase does not include device registration, as registration actually occurs during the enroll phase. The protect phase focuses more on compliance and security configurations. Lastly, selective wipe is designed to remove only organizational data while preserving personal files, which makes the final statement false. Question 13. For each statement below, indicate whether the answer is true or false. Enterprise state roaming requires the user's device to be enrolled in Intune. False. Audit logs in Intune include actions like create, update, delete, and assign. True. Device settings in Microsoft Entra ID control who can register personal devices. True. The export limit for the all devices list is 100,000, regardless of browser. False. Now let me guide you through the reasoning behind each classification. Enterprise state roaming does not require Intune enrollment because it works with devices that are joined to Microsoft Entra ID, making the first statement false. Moving forward, audit logs indeed track administrative actions such as creating or assigning items, so the second statement is true. In addition, the device settings section of Microsoft Entra ID governs join and registration permissions, including who can register personal devices, validating the third statement. However, the export limit for the all devices list varies by browser, with much lower limits in Internet Explorer and higher limits in modern browsers like Edge and Chrome, which means the final statement is false. Question 14. Arrange the steps to enable a device for Microsoft Entra Join. Instruction. Drag and drop the items into the correct order, starting with the first step at the top. Open the Azure portal. Navigate to Microsoft Entra Instance. Open the Users and Groups Administration pane. Configure options in the Device Settings section. Now let me explain why this sequence is correct. You begin by opening the Azure portal, since it serves as the central entry point for managing all Microsoft Cloud services. From there, you navigate to your Microsoft Entra instance because that is where identity and device-related configuration is performed. After that, you access the Users and Groups Administration pane, which contains the controls needed to manage permissions and directory settings. Finally, you configure the required options in the Device Settings section, as this is where device join policies and registration permissions are defined for Microsoft Entra Join. Question 15. For each Android Enterprise Management type, drag it to the correct usage scenario. Each item may be used once, more than once, or not at all. Allows full control over the entire device for work-only use. Android Enterprise Fully Managed. Allows work and personal profiles to coexist with separate app control. Android Enterprise Work Profile. Designed for kiosk-style or single-use corporate devices. Android Enterprise Dedicated. Now let me explain why these matches align with each scenario. Android Enterprise Fully Managed is the right fit for work-only devices because administrators gain full control over the entire device, applying company policies broadly without personal use considerations. Meanwhile, Android Enterprise Work Profile is ideal for environments where employees use their own devices as it keeps personal data private while letting IT manage only the work profile, making it suitable for BYOD situations. Additionally, Android Enterprise Dedicated is designed for highly specialized corporate scenarios, such as kiosks, digital signage, or ticketing devices, where the device is locked into a narrow set of permitted functions. Question 16. Match each Intune remote action to its correct description or outcome. Each item may be used once, more than once, or not at all. Restores a device to factory settings. Wipe removes managed apps and settings and unmanages the device. Retire forces the device to check in and apply pending actions. Sync performs a Defender antivirus full system scan. Full scan. Now let me walk you through why these mappings are correct. The wipe action restores a device to its factory settings, giving administrators the option to remove or preserve user data depending on policy requirements. In contrast, the retire action removes managed apps, profiles, and corporate data assigned through Intune, while also removing the device from management, making it suitable for offboarding scenarios. Additionally, Sync immediately triggers a check-in so the device retrieves pending configuration updates or compliance policies without waiting for the normal cycle. Finally, Full Scan instructs Microsoft Defender to perform a comprehensive antivirus scan across all files and directories, offering deeper analysis than a quick scan. Question 17. You are an Intune administrator and have received multiple reports that users are unable to complete device enrollment. You need to determine at which step in the enrollment process users are failing so you can refine and update the onboarding documentation accordingly. Which tool or report should you use? Select one answer. A. Use the Incomplete User Enrollments report under the Devices Monitor section. B. View the audit logs in the Intune Admin Center. C. Export the list of all devices to a .csv file and analyze failures. D. Search for unregistered devices in Microsoft Entra ID. The correct answer is A. Use the Incomplete User Enrollments report under the Devices Monitor section. Now let me walk you through why this option is the correct choice. The Incomplete User Enrollments report provides visibility into exactly where users abandon the enrollment flow, such as failing to proceed past the Terms of Use page, making it the most relevant tool for troubleshooting enrollment drop-off points. Meanwhile, the audit logs only capture administrative actions like creating or updating configurations, so they do not provide insight into user progress or failure stages during enrollment. In addition, exporting a list of devices to a .csv file does not help because these lists lack step-by-step enrollment tracking, preventing you from identifying where users get stuck. Finally, searching for unregistered devices in Microsoft Entra ID only shows which devices are registered or not which enrollment steps were completed or abandoned, making option D insufficient. Question 18. Which two options are valid MDM user scope settings for configuring automatic enrollment in Microsoft Intune? Select two answers. A. Some, B. Hybrid, C. All, D. Default, E. Manual. The correct answers are A. Some, and C. All. Now I'll explain why these two options are the valid choices. The Some option allows administrators to target specific Azure AD user groups for automatic MDM enrollment, offering flexibility when only certain users should be automatically onboarded. In addition, the All setting enrolls every licensed user automatically, ensuring broad coverage across the organization without needing granular group assignments. On the other hand, Hybrid is not a valid MDM user scope setting and therefore cannot be selected for automatic enrollment. Likewise, Default is not part of the MDM user scope options within Intune's configuration. Finally, Manual describes an enrollment method rather than a scope setting, so it does not apply to this context. Question 19. Your organization issues corporate-owned Android tablets for single-use purposes, such as event check-in kiosks. You want to lock down these devices to a specific app and prevent users from installing anything else. Which Android Enterprise enrollment method should you use? Select one answer. A. Android Enterprise Fully Managed. B. Android Enterprise Dedicated. C. Android Enterprise Work Profile. D. Personal enrollment using Company Portal. The correct answer is B. Android Enterprise Dedicated. Now let me explain why this is the appropriate choice. Android Enterprise Dedicated is specifically designed for single-purpose corporate devices, allowing administrators to restrict the device to a limited set of apps or web links, which is perfect for kiosk-style deployments. On the other hand, Android Enterprise Fully Managed provides full device control, but is intended for multi-app enterprise use rather than lockdown scenarios. Additionally, Android Enterprise Work Profile suits BYOD environments where work and personal data must remain separate, making it irrelevant for kiosk devices. Finally, personal enrollment using the company portal is a user-driven BYOD method and does not support the strict lockdown needed for corporate-owned single-use tablets. Question 20. Which three types of Intune profiles can be used to configure connectivity features for user devices? Select three answers. A. Wi-Fi profile. B. Email profile. C. VPN profile. D. Endpoint protection profile. E. Device restrictions profile. The correct answers are A. Wi-Fi profile, B. Email profile, and C. VPN profile. Now let's break down why these three profiles are the correct choices. A Wi-Fi profile is used to automatically configure wireless settings on managed devices, ensuring users can seamlessly connect to corporate networks without entering credentials manually. Likewise, an email profile standardizes configuration settings for corporate email accounts so users can access their mail with minimal setup. In addition, a VPN profile enables secure access to internal company resources by configuring virtual private network settings on the device. On the other hand, endpoint protection profiles focus on security controls like BitLocker or Defender rather than connectivity. Finally, device restrictions profiles manage device behaviors such as blocking cameras or controlling app permissions, which are not related to connectivity settings. Question 21. For each statement below, indicate whether the answer is true or false. Wi-Fi profiles in Intune require manual configuration by each end user. False. Custom profiles for Windows use OMA URI settings to configure unsupported features. True, excluding a user group and including a device group may still apply the policy to the user's device. True. Android Enterprise supports a broad list of custom OMA URI settings natively through Intune. False. Let's unpack why each of these is marked this way. Wi-Fi profiles are pushed from Intune to the device, so users do not have to manually type in SSIDs and passwords, which makes that first statement false. By contrast, custom profiles for Windows really do rely on OMA URI entries to configure settings that are not exposed by the built-in templates, so that one is true. Furthermore, Intune evaluates assignment by prioritizing inclusion over exclusion, meaning that if a device is in an included group, the policy can still reach it even when the user group is excluded, so the third statement is true. Finally, Android Enterprise supports only a limited subset of OMA URI settings when managed through Intune, not a broad list, which is why the last statement is false. Question 22. Your organization wants to streamline network configuration and ensure users automatically connect to corporate Wi-Fi and VPN without manual setup. As the Intune admin, you need to recommend profiles that achieve this goal. Select two answers: A. Wi-Fi profile, B. VPN profile, C. Custom profile, D. Device restrictions profile, E. Identity protection profile. The correct answers are A. Wi-Fi profile, and B. VPN profile. Let me walk you through why these two are the right selections. A Wi-Fi profile automates the wireless configuration process, allowing devices to connect to corporate networks without requiring users to manually enter passwords or settings. In addition, a VPN profile automatically configures secure remote access, ensuring users can reach internal resources without performing their own VPN setup. Meanwhile, a custom profile is only needed when configuring unsupported settings and is not required for standard Wi-Fi or VPN scenarios. Similarly, a device restrictions profile governs hardware and software limitations rather than connectivity. Finally, an identity protection profile configures Windows Hello for Business, which has nothing to do with network access. Question 23. Fill in the blank by selecting the correct option from the drop-down menu. Group policy can limit profile size using the Limit Profile Size setting. Let me explain why this option is the correct one. The limit profile size setting is specifically designed within group policy to restrict how large a user profile can grow, helping prevent issues with roaming profiles and excessive storage consumption. By contrast, the app data folder can indeed become large, but it cannot be directly controlled by this policy. Similarly, a local profile simply describes the type of profile stored on the device and does not impose size restrictions. Furthermore, the HKLM Hive and User Hive represent registry locations rather than mechanisms for managing disk usage. Lastly, Credential Manager is used for password and credential storage, not for controlling profile size. Question 24. Arrange the following steps to create a PowerShell script policy for Windows devices in Microsoft Intune. Instruction: drag and drop the items into the correct order, starting with the first step at the top. Go to Devices, Scripts, add and select Windows 10 and later. Enter name and description. Configure script settings, location, credentials, signing, host bitness. Configure scope tags and assignments. Complete the policy creation. Now I'm going to explain why this order makes sense. You begin by going to Devices, then Scripts, choosing Add, and selecting Windows 10 and later, because you must first specify the platform and script workflow before any configuration can occur. After that, you enter a name and description so the policy is easy to identify and manage among other scripts in the Admin Center. Next, you configure the script settings, which is where you upload the PowerShell file, choose how it runs, handle credentials, and decide on signing and host bitness, so the technical behavior is fully defined. Once the script itself is configured, you move on to scope tags and assignments, determining which admins can see the policy and which user or device groups will receive it. Finally, you complete the policy creation, which saves and activates the configuration, so Intune can begin delivering the script to the targeted Windows devices. Question 25. For each statement below, indicate whether the answer is true or false. You need access to an app's source code to use the Intune app wrapping tool. False. Apps published to the Google Play Store can be protected using the Intune app SDK. True. App protection policies can block access to jailbroken or rooted devices. True. Without MDM, admins can still push app installations and certs to user devices. False. Now let me walk you through why each statement falls into its respective category. The first statement is false because the Intune app wrapping tool only requires the app package and the appropriate signing credentials, not the full source code. Meanwhile, the Intune app SDK can indeed be integrated into apps listed on public stores like Google Play, enabling MAM protections without full device management. Additionally, app protection policies can detect compromised devices, such as jailbroken or rooted devices, and block access to corporate data, making the third statement true. Finally, without MDM, administrators cannot push apps or certificates to devices, since those deployment capabilities require a managed environment, which is why the last statement is false. Question 26. For each statement below, indicate whether the answer is true or false. Deployment types define the install content and logic of an application in Configuration Manager. True. Global conditions are used only for uninstall actions. False. Supersedence can be used to replace one application with a newer version. True. Task sequences are better than application groups for complex multi-app deployments. True. Now let's take a moment to understand why each statement is classified this way. Deployment types are indeed the core of what actually gets installed because they contain the files, detection logic, requirements, and commands that define how an application behaves during deployment. Meanwhile, global conditions are not limited to uninstall actions. They can be applied to both install and uninstall requirements, which makes the second statement false. In addition, supersedence gives administrators the ability to automatically replace or upgrade older versions of applications with newer ones, making the third statement true. Finally, task sequences excel in complex multi-app deployments because they support restarts, sequencing, conditional branching, and a higher degree of orchestration than application groups. So the last statement is also true. Question 27. Fill in the blanks by selecting the correct options from the drop-down menus. To customize a deployment package, administrators can use Advanced Deployment to apply a customization file for products such as Microsoft Office. Now let me explain why these selected options are correct. The Advanced Deployment option in Group Policy enables administrators to configure more detailed installation behavior beyond the basic deployment settings, providing the flexibility required for complex software rollouts. Additionally, customization files such as Office Setup Config.msp allow fine-tuned control over how Office installs, including language selections, feature sets, and default configurations. By contrast, items like removal settings, detection rules, and application groups are unrelated to customizing installation behavior and therefore would not fit in this context. Question 28. Fill in the blanks by selecting the correct options from the drop-down menus. During deployment, Office is installed in all Windows-supported languages already present on the user's device. To install additional language packs, admins can select Language Options and choose from Core, Partial, and Proofing language types. Let me walk you through why these choices are accurate. Language options allow administrators to extend the set of Office languages beyond what is already present on the device, enabling broader language availability during deployment. Furthermore, Core, Partial, and Proofing represent the actual language pack categories that can be deployed through Intune, each offering different levels of language support depending on organizational needs. Meanwhile, choices like Update Cadence, MSI Override, Publisher Tag, Privacy Level, or Install Urgency do not relate to Office language configuration and therefore do not fit in this context. Question 29. For each statement below, indicate whether the answer is true or false. The App Licenses page shows install failures and lets you export data to CSV. Discovered Apps includes all apps installed on corporate devices. True, the Overview page shows a list of all apps and their assignment status. Only apps installed via the company portal appear for personal devices in Discovered Apps. False. Now let me walk you through the reasoning behind these answers. The first statement is false because the App Licenses page is designed to show license allocation and usage details, not installation failures or CSV export options. Meanwhile, the second statement is true, since Discovered Apps on corporate devices provides a complete inventory of all installed applications, regardless of how they were deployed. Additionally, the Overview page does indeed display all apps along with their assignment and installation information, making that statement true. Finally, the last statement is false, because even on personal devices, apps deployed as required, not only those installed through the company portal, will still show up in the Discovered Apps list. Question 30. Match each app assignment option to its supported deployment behavior based on Intune device enrollment. Each item may be used once, more than once, or not at all. Assigned to users, supported on both enrolled and unenrolled devices. Assigned to devices, only supported on enrolled devices. Assign as required, not supported on unenrolled devices. Uninstall apps. Only applies if Intune originally deployed the app. Now, let me walk you through why these matches are correct. Assigning to users is flexible because it works on both enrolled and unenrolled devices, allowing app availability regardless of device management status. In contrast, Assign to devices requires that the device be enrolled, since device-based targeting depends on Intune having full management control. Additionally, Assign as required only functions on enrolled devices because required apps install automatically, a capability that unenrolled devices do not support. Finally, the Uninstall Apps option only works when Intune originally installed the application, ensuring Intune has the necessary control to remove it properly. Question 31. Which two capabilities are provided by Intune Managed Apps for enhancing data protection? Select two answers. A. Opening links only in the Intune Managed browser. B. Restricting app installation based on storage encryption. C. Blocking Save As functionality for sensitive data. D. preventing app usage during non-business hours. The correct answers are A, opening links only in the Intune Managed browser, and C, blocking Save As functionality for sensitive data. Now let's move into the explanation so you understand why these two stand out. Opening links only in the Intune Managed browser works because Microsoft Intune allows administrators to control how corporate data moves between apps. Consequently, forcing links to open in the Managed browser ensures sensitive information never leaves the protected environment. For example, if a user tries to open a company link in a personal browser like Chrome, Intune automatically redirects it to the secure Managed browser instead. Meanwhile, blocking Save As functionality for sensitive data is equally important. Intune app protection policies can stop users from saving corporate files to unapproved locations, which reduces the risk of data leakage. Imagine an employee trying to save a confidential report to their personal device storage. Intune prevents that action to maintain compliance. On the other hand, restricting app installation based on storage encryption isn't specific to Intune managed apps. And preventing app usage during non-business hours isn't controlled by the apps themselves, but rather through conditional access sign-in restrictions. Therefore, the correct capabilities are A, opening links only in the Intune managed browser, and C, blocking Save As functionality for sensitive data. Question 32. You're investigating a situation where some users are accessing work apps but not receiving app protection policies. You want to confirm whether the apps have checked in with Intune in a work context. What should you do? Select one answer. A, use the user status tile in the App Protection Status pane. B, check the device compliance report under Endpoint Security. C, run the Microsoft Defender for Endpoint Health Report. D, review the conditional access log in Azure AD. The correct answer is A. Use the user status tile in the App Protection Status pane. All right, let's unpack why option A is the right choice. The user status tile in the App Protection Status pane is designed specifically to show whether each user's apps have checked in with Intune and applied the mobile application management policies, so it directly answers the question about app protection compliance in a work context. In contrast, the device compliance report under Endpoint Security focuses on MDM compliance for the device itself, such as settings or configuration profiles, not app-level MAM status. Additionally, the Microsoft Defender for Endpoint Health report is centered on threat protection and security posture, so it doesn't track whether app protection policies have been received. Moreover, conditional access logs in Azure AD mainly record sign-in decisions and access evaluations, which means they won't tell you if a specific app has checked in with Intune for MAM policies. Hence, the best way to verify whether those work apps are receiving app protection policies is option A, the user status tile in the App Protection Status pane. Question 33. Which behavior is expected when deploying a provisioned UWP app that has already been pre-installed for one or more users? Select one answer. A, it will silently reinstall for all users. B, deployment will be skipped to prevent conflicts. C, all previously installed copies will be removed first. D, the app will fail to deploy without any error. The correct answer is B, deployment will be skipped to prevent conflicts. Now let's walk through why Intune behaves this way. When a UWP app has already been pre-installed for one or more users, Intune avoids reinstalling it because provisioned apps are intended to be installed once per device, not repeatedly per user. Consequently, if the system detects the app is already present, it skips deployment to prevent unexpected behavior or version conflicts. For instance, if a user manually installed the app earlier, Intune will simply bypass the deployment rather than attempt an overwrite. Meanwhile, the idea that it would silently reinstall for all users isn't accurate because provisioned apps don't reinstall per user session. Likewise, Intune does not remove previously installed copies automatically, so option C doesn't apply. And although deployments can be skipped, saying the app would fail without error is not a predictable or standard outcome. Therefore, the expected and correct behavior is B. Deployment will be skipped to prevent conflicts. Question 34. You are an IT administrator managing devices with Microsoft Intune. You notice that some apps previously assigned via Microsoft Store for Business are no longer syncing and new apps can't be assigned. You also observe that the connector page has disappeared from the Intune Admin Center. This behavior started shortly after April 30th, 2023. What is the most likely explanation? Select one answer. A. Apps were removed by a user with global administrator rights. B. Microsoft Store for Business services were disconnected from Intune. C. The device lost network connectivity to the Microsoft Store. D. Licenses for the assigned apps were revoked by mistake. The correct answer is B. Microsoft Store for Business services were disconnected from Intune. Let's go through why this is the most logical explanation. First, the key clue is the timing around April 30th, 2023, which aligns with Microsoft retiring Store for Business integration. So after that date, Intune can no longer sync apps or show the connector page. Consequently, apps that were previously assigned through Microsoft Store for Business stop updating, and you can't deploy new ones because the underlying service connection has been turned off, not because of a configuration mistake. Moreover, if a global administrator had simply removed apps, you would still see the connector page in the portal, so option A does not fully match the symptoms. Likewise, a loss of network connectivity to the Microsoft Store might affect downloads on devices, but it would not make the connector page disappear from Intune, which rules out option C. Finally, revoking licenses by accident would impact which users can use specific apps, yet it would not explain why syncing stopped globally or why the connector itself is gone, so option D is also unlikely. Therefore, the behavior most clearly points to option B, Microsoft Store for Business services being disconnected from Intune. Question 35. You've assigned a Microsoft 365 app suite to a group of Windows devices. During deployment, several installations fail and users report unsaved work was lost. You confirm no MSI apps were present. What is the most likely cause? Select one answer. A. The devices had Office apps open during installation. B. The Microsoft 365 suite was not marked as featured in the company portal. C. The suite was deployed without setting Bing as the default search engine. D. The suite was missing the publisher and owner fields. The correct answer is A. The devices had Office apps open during installation. Let us break down why this option fits the situation best. When Office apps like Word or Excel are open while a Microsoft 365 suite deployment is running, the installer may need to update or replace files that are currently in use. As a result, the setup can interrupt those running applications, which not only increases the risk of installation failures, but can also close the apps and cause users to lose any unsaved work. In contrast, whether the suite is marked as featured in the company portal only affects how prominently it appears to users and has no impact on the reliability of the install itself. Likewise, choosing not to set Bing as the default search engine changes only a preference extension and does not influence the core Office binaries that are being deployed. Finally, missing publisher or owner fields affects metadata used for identification and reporting, not the actual installation engine or user data. Therefore, the scenario of failed installs and lost unsaved work most strongly points to option A. The devices had Office apps open during installation. Question 36. Arrange the phases of the software lifecycle managed through group policy in the correct order. Instruction. Drag and drop the items into the correct order, starting with the first step at the top. Preparation. Deployment. Maintenance. Removal. Now let's walk through why this sequence is the proper lifecycle flow. The software lifecycle begins with the preparation phase, where applications are packaged and configured before being distributed, even though this specific step occurs outside of group policy. Following that is the deployment phase, during which group policy installs the software on targeted machines. Furthermore, once the application is in use, The maintenance phase supports updates, repairs, and ongoing adjustments to ensure continued functionality. Finally, the removal phase handles uninstalling applications when they are no longer needed or when policy requires them to be removed. So the complete software lifecycle progresses through preparation, deployment, maintenance, and ultimately removal. Question 37. For each statement below, indicate whether the answer is true or false. Conditional access can restrict access to Exchange on-premises based on device compliance. True, Exchange on-premises does not support conditional access policies. False, devices must be recognized by Intune to access Exchange through ActiveSync. True, new ActiveSync records unknown to Intune will have access granted by default. False. Now I'm going to explain why each of these statements is marked this way. First, conditional access can indeed restrict access to Exchange on-premises when it is integrated with Intune and Microsoft Entra, because the Exchange connector uses device-compliant state from Intune to allow or block connections. In contrast, the claim that Exchange on-premises does not support conditional access is inaccurate, since once that integration is configured, on-prem mailboxes can absolutely be governed by those same policies. Moreover, devices must be recognized by Intune for Exchange ActiveSync access, because if Intune cannot map a connecting device to a managed record and confirm it is compliant, it will issue a block command rather than allowing mail to flow. Finally, new ActiveSync records that are unknown to Intune are not granted access by default. Instead, they are blocked until they are discovered, mapped, and evaluated, which is why that last statement is false. Question 38. For each statement below, indicate whether the answer is true or false. The Power BI Intune Compliance app uses the desktop client to generate reports. False. Intune Data Warehouse provides historical data that is refreshed daily. True. Microsoft Graph API offers the simplest method to build custom Intune dashboards. False. Users need specific Entra permissions to access Microsoft Graph resources. True. Now let's walk through the explanations so you understand why each choice is correct. To begin with, the Power BI Intune Compliance app does not rely on the desktop client. Instead, it runs through the web version of Power BI, meaning the desktop requirement is unnecessary. Meanwhile, the Intune Data Warehouse absolutely provides daily refreshed historical data, which is why it is often used for long-term reporting and trends. Furthermore, although Microsoft Graph API is extremely powerful, it is not the simplest method for building dashboards because it requires development skills, authentication handling, and API logic, unlike Power BI or the Data Warehouse, which offer more straightforward reporting tools. Finally, Microsoft Graph is fully permission controlled, so users must have the right Microsoft Entra scopes before they can query or access any graph data. Question 39. Fill in the blanks by selecting the correct options from the drop-down menus. Microsoft Graph API enables access to Intune data using entity relationships and navigation paths. This makes it easier to extract complex datasets compared to CSV exports or static UI reports. Now I'm going to break down why these choices are correct. First of all, entity relationships are at the heart of Microsoft Graph because it models Intune objects as connected entities, such as users, devices, and apps that reference one another, which lets you pull richer, related data in a single query. In addition, navigation paths let you traverse those relationships directly in the URL, for example, moving from a user to their managed devices or app assignments, so you can walk through the data graph instead of running separate, isolated queries. Moreover, CSV exports are flat files that list rows and columns without preserving these relationships, meaning you would have to manually join and correlate data after downloading it, which is far less efficient than working with Graph's relational structure. Question 40. Which client operating system versions support always-on VPN connections? Select one answer. A. Windows 8.1 and earlier only. B. Windows 10 and 11 only. C. Any OS with a VPN client. D. Windows Server 2012 R2 and later. The correct answer is Windows 10 and 11 only. Now let's walk through why this is the right choice. To begin with, Always On VPN is a modern, Windows-specific VPN technology that was introduced starting with Windows 10, which means Windows 11 also supports it because it builds on the same VPN platform. Furthermore, earlier versions like Windows 8.1 simply do not have the networking stack capabilities required for Always On VPN, so they can't participate regardless of configuration. Similarly, although many operating systems can use traditional VPN clients, Always On VPN is not a generic VPN solution. It relies on Windows platform features such as device tunnel and modern authentication, so other OS platforms cannot use it. Finally, Windows Server editions like 2012 R2 aren't considered client operating systems and are used to host VPN infrastructure, not to consume Always On VPN connections. Question 41. For each multi-factor authentication concept, drag it to the appropriate box in the correct match column to match it against its description. Each item may be used once, more than once, or not at all. Cloud-based MFA that requires no on-prem infrastructure. Correct match, Microsoft Entra MFA Cloud Service, used with on-prem ADFS and managed infrastructure. Correct match, Azure MFA Server, sends one-time passwords or push notifications through a mobile app. Correct match, Microsoft Authenticator app, protects Microsoft 365 Global Administrator accounts with a subset of MFA features. Correct match, MFA for Microsoft Entra Global Admins. I'm going to walk you through the explanation so you understand why each match is correct. To begin with, Microsoft Entra MFA Cloud Service fits the cloud-based scenario because it runs completely in the cloud and eliminates the need for any on-premises infrastructure, making it ideal for cloud-only or federated environments. Next, Azure MFA Server is the option designed for organizations that still maintain on-prem ADFS and need to integrate MFA into that managed infrastructure. It's a legacy method, but still aligns with this description. Furthermore, Microsoft Authenticator app is the method that delivers push notifications and generates one-time passcodes on a user's mobile device. This makes it the correct match for scenarios requiring OTPs or app-based approval. Finally, MFA for Microsoft Entra Global Admins applies when protecting high-privilege accounts. It provides a streamlined subset of MFA features specifically tailored to secure global administrators without needing the full MFA feature set. By connecting each concept to how it functions in real-world deployments, the answer choices become much easier to understand and remember. Question 42. Arrange the following steps to generate the device compliance report in Microsoft Intune. Instruction: drag and drop the items into the correct order, starting with the first step at the top. Sign in to the Microsoft Intune Admin Center. Select Reports, Device Compliance. In the Details pane, select the Reports tab. Select the Device Compliance Report. Apply filters for compliance status, OS, and ownership. Select Generate Report. Now that we've reviewed the ordered steps, let's walk through the explanation so the process becomes easy to remember. First, everything begins with signing in to the Microsoft Intune Admin Center because all reporting features are accessed from within the portal. Next, navigating to reports and choosing device compliance takes you to the section where all compliance-related reporting tools are located. This is the gateway to the report engine. After that, switching to the Reports tab inside the Details pane exposes the available reporting options, which aren't visible until you open this specific tab. Following this, selecting the Device Compliance Report loads the interface where you can analyze compliance health across your devices. Then, applying filters such as compliance status, operating system, and ownership ensures that the report reflects exactly the subset of devices you want to assess. This is especially helpful in large environments. Finally, selecting Generate Report produces the filtered compliance results, giving you a clean and actionable overview of device compliance across your organization. This sequence mirrors the actual workflow in Intune, making it straightforward to perform again whenever needed. Question 43. Which two statements about compliance policy assignments in Intune are correct? Select two answers. A. Compliance policies are assigned to devices directly. B. Compliance policies must be assigned to users. C. If a device is not enrolled in Intune, compliance can't be evaluated. D. Compliance policies can be applied to any device regardless of enrollment. The correct answers are B. Compliance policies must be assigned to users, and C. If a device is not enrolled in Intune, compliance can't be evaluated. Now let's take a moment to walk through why these two are correct. To begin with, Intune evaluates compliance at the device level, but the targeting itself is user-based, which is why option B is accurate. Assigning these policies to users ensures that any device enrolled under that user inherits the required compliance rules automatically. Moreover, option C is correct because compliance evaluation relies on the device being enrolled. Without enrollment, Intune cannot collect configuration data, report compliance status, or enforce the policy. On the other hand, option A is incorrect, since compliance policies are never assigned directly to devices, even though the results apply to them. Additionally, option D doesn't work because devices outside Intune management cannot process compliance checks at all. This makes enrollment a fundamental requirement for enforcement. Question 44. Fill in the blanks by selecting the correct options from the drop-down menus. BitLocker protects entire volumes and uses TPM to verify system integrity before boot. Now let's take a moment to break this down. To start, BitLocker is Microsoft's built-in full-volume encryption technology, which means it protects entire drives rather than individual files. That's why it's the correct choice here. Furthermore, TPM plays a crucial role because it validates that the system hasn't been tampered with before unlocking the encrypted volume. This ensures that even if someone tries to alter the boot process, the drive stays protected. Meanwhile, options like EFS wouldn't be correct since it focuses on file-level protection rather than full disk encryption. Similarly, user certificates aren't part of BitLocker's core integrity verification process, and network policies simply don't relate to boot-level protection. Question 45. Which two features are supported by MBAM for managing BitLocker? Select two answers. A. Self-service BitLocker recovery portal. B. Creating EFS user certificates. C. Enforcing encryption compliance policies. D. Migrating smart cards for EFS. The correct answers are A. Self-service BitLocker recovery portal, and C. Enforcing encryption compliance policies. Now let's walk through why these are the right choices. To start, MBAM includes a self-service BitLocker recovery portal, allowing users to recover their own BitLocker keys without requiring IET support. This streamlines troubleshooting and reduces help desk workload. Furthermore, MBAM enforces encryption compliance policies, giving organizations the ability to monitor, audit, and ensure their devices comply with required BitLocker encryption standards. Meanwhile, creating EFS user certificates is unrelated because EFS is a different encryption mechanism separate from MBAM. Similarly, migrating smart cards for EFS depends on EFS tooling and has no connection to BitLocker or MBAM's management capabilities. Question 46. Which two actions can help protect user EFS keys from being lost due to disk failure or corruption? Select two answers. A. Export the private key to a PFX file and store it externally. B. Encrypt the file system with NTFS. C. Store EFS keys in a secure USB flash drive or smart card. D. Disable automatic updates to avoid corruption. The correct answers are A. Export the private key to a PFX file and store it externally, and C. Store EFS keys in a secure USB flash drive or smart card. Let's break down why these two matter. Exporting the private key into a PFX file and keeping it somewhere external ensures that the key is recoverable even if the main device is lost, damaged, or the OS becomes corrupted. Additionally, storing EFS keys in a secure USB flash drive or smart card provides an extra layer of protection since the key remains separate from the physical machine and is less vulnerable to disk-related failures. On the other hand, encrypting the file system with NTFS does not safeguard the EFS private keys themselves. It merely supports the use of EFS. Likewise, disabling automatic updates has no relationship to encryption key protection or EFS key recovery. Question 47. Fill in the blanks by selecting the correct options from the drop-down menus. If you don't have a DRA certificate available, you must create and upload one before deploying WIP encryption policies. Now let's walk through why this choice is required. A data recovery agent certificate is necessary because it enables administrators to recover WIP encrypted files if a device becomes inaccessible or the encryption key is lost. Without uploading a valid DRA certificate before applying WIP policies, organizations risk losing access to protected work data entirely. On the other hand, exporting public keys wouldn't allow recovery because public keys cannot decrypt encrypted content. Changing BitLocker policy doesn't apply here since BitLocker isn't involved in WIP recovery. Similarly, issuing a TPM unlock key relates only to BitLocker operations, not WIP or EFS. Question 48. For each statement below, indicate whether the answer is true or false. Microsoft Defender for Endpoint supports role-based access control for portal visibility. True. Advanced hunting in Defender relies on machine learning models only. False. Device Guard combines application control and kernel-level protection using Hyper-V. Audit Mode allows organizations to evaluate Defender Exploit Guard impact without enforcing blocks. True. Let's go through why each of these is marked this way. First, Microsoft Defender for Endpoint does support role-based access control, so different teams can see only the data and features appropriate to their role, which makes that first statement true. However, advanced hunting is not based only on machine learning. It primarily uses a powerful query language, KQL, over collected telemetry, so the second statement is false. Additionally, Device Guard is correctly described because it combines application control with Hyper-V-based virtualization features like HVCI to protect kernel processes, so the third statement is true. Finally, Defender Exploit Guard Audit Mode records events without actually blocking activity, allowing admins to review the impact before turning on enforcement, which means the last statement is also true. Question 49. For each statement below, indicate whether the answer is true or false. You can configure Windows Defender Firewall to block all incoming connections, including those from allowed apps. True. Security associations represent active authenticated or encrypted connections in IPsec. True. Windows Defender Firewall always applies settings equally across all network adapters. False. Windows Defender Smart Screen works only with Microsoft Edge. False. Now let's walk through the reasoning behind each one. To start, Windows Defender Firewall does include a hardened profile option that blocks all incoming connections, even if the app would normally be allowed, so that first statement is true. Next, security associations genuinely represent authenticated or encrypted IPsec-protected connections, which makes the second statement true as well. However, firewall rules can be scoped to particular interfaces, profiles, and network types, so settings are not applied uniformly to every adapter, making the third statement false. Finally, Smart Screen Protection extends beyond Microsoft Edge and applies to Microsoft Store apps and downloaded files system-wide, which means the last statement is false. Question 50. For each Windows Information Protection WIP capability, drag it to the appropriate boxes in the correct match column to match it against its description in the option column. Each item may be used once, more than once, or not at all. Protects corporate data on devices even when they are personally owned. Correct match, WIP device encryption. Removes organizational data while preserving personal content. Correct match, selective wipe. Tracks policy violations and logs user responses. Correct match, audit reporting. Allows apps to access corporate data only if approved. Correct match, allowed apps list. Allows users to work with personal and corporate files in the same application. Correct match, enlightened apps. Now let's walk through why each pairing is correct. First, WIP device encryption is designed to protect corporate data on any device, whether it's company issued or personally owned, by encrypting work content when it's copied from trusted locations like SharePoint or OneDrive. Next, selective wipe focuses on cleaning up only organizational data. So when a device is wiped for corporate reasons, the user's personal photos, documents, and apps stay intact. Additionally, audit reporting is the feature that logs WIP policy violations and user responses, which helps security teams analyze behavior and fine-tune policies over time. Furthermore, the allowed apps list controls which applications are permitted to access protected corporate data, ensuring only explicitly approved apps can open or handle that information. Finally, enlightened apps, such as newer versions of Microsoft Word, can distinguish between personal and corporate content in the same app window, automatically applying protection to work data while leaving personal files unprotected. Together, these capabilities show how WIP not only encrypts data, but also manages which apps can use it, how it is wiped, and how user actions are monitored for compliance. Question 51. Which two options help preserve access to EFS encrypted data if a user's device fails? Select two answers. A. Back up the EFS certificate and private key to a secure location. B. Use BitLocker with a pin on the system volume. C. Issue certificates via a certification authority with key archival. D. Configure Windows Hello facial recognition. The correct answers are A and C. Now let's walk through the explanation. To begin with, backing up the EFS certificate and private key ensures that encrypted files can still be accessed if the device is lost or the drive becomes unreadable, because EFS relies entirely on those keys for decryption. Moreover, issuing certificates through a certification authority with key archival provides an additional safety net, since the CA can restore the necessary keys if a user's keys are lost, which guarantees access to EFS-protected data even after hardware failure. On the other hand, using BitLocker with a PIN protects the system volume but has no connection to EFS file-level encryption, so it doesn't help with recovering encrypted documents. Similarly, Windows Hello facial recognition is purely an authentication method and does not provide any mechanism for recovering EFS encrypted files. That's why the correct answers are A. Back up the EFS certificate and private key to a secure location, and C. Issue certificates via a certification authority with key archival. Question 52. Which two WIP modes should be used during policy testing before applying strict enforcement? Select two answers. A. Silent. B. Allow overrides. C. Block or hide overrides. D. Off. The correct answers are A and B. Now let's break down why these two are recommended. To start with, silent mode is ideal for early testing because it logs override attempts without interrupting the user's workflow, giving administrators visibility into what actions would have been blocked. Additionally, Allow overrides provides helpful insight as well, since it warns users about risky actions, but still permits those actions while logging them, making it perfect for analyzing real-world behavior without causing productivity issues. Conversely, block or hide overrides is too strict for testing because it immediately prevents risky actions and could disrupt users before the policy is ready for enforcement. Finally, off mode disables WIP entirely and therefore offers no useful data for policy evaluation. So the correct choices are A. Silent, and B. Allow overrides. Question 53. You've been assigned to begin migrating your organization from a legacy CASB to Microsoft Defender for Cloud Apps. You want to avoid disruptions to current app traffic or duplication of controls. What is the best approach? Select one answer. A. Migrate all policies and disconnect legacy CASB on the same day. B. Use API connectors and migrate policies in stages. C. Disable log collectors in the old CASB before configuring Defender. D. Enable conditional access app control on every app simultaneously. The correct answer is B. Use API connectors and migrate policies in stages. Let's unpack why this is the safest strategy. To start, API connectors let Defender for Cloud Apps connect to SaaS services in a read-only, non-intrusive way, so you gain visibility without changing traffic paths or breaking existing sessions. As you gradually recreate and tune policies in Defender, both systems can run in parallel, which means you can test behavior and coverage before turning off the legacy CASB. By contrast, option A is risky because migrating everything and disconnecting the old CCASB in a single day can easily introduce coverage gaps, misconfigurations, or outages that users feel immediately. Similarly, option C suggests disabling log collectors first, but doing that before Defender is fully ready would reduce monitoring and leave you temporarily blind to some activity. Finally, option D, enabling conditional access app control on every app at once, can cause double proxying, unexpected prompts, and performance issues if not rolled out carefully. So the controlled, low disruption approach is clearly B. Use API connectors and migrate policies in stages. Question 54. Fill in the blanks by selecting the correct options from the drop-down menus. The standard user analyzer is used to detect compatibility issues related to user account control, while SLAT support is a required hardware feature for enabling client Hyper-V. Now let's walk through why these choices are correct. To begin with, the standard user analyzer is designed specifically to identify problems that occur when applications run with standard user rights. It helps developers and IT admins detect UAC-related issues, such as apps that assume elevated permissions or attempt restricted operations. This makes it the right tool for diagnosing compatibility challenges connected to user account control. Meanwhile, a SLAT support, or second-level address translation, is a hardware virtualization capability found in modern CPUs. It is mandatory for running client Hyper-V on Windows devices, because Hyper-V relies on SLAT to efficiently manage memory for virtual machines. Without SLAT, the Hyper-V role cannot be enabled on client operating systems. Other options like Windows Defender, Group Policy Object, Compatibility Mode, or Secure Boot don't address UAC diagnostics or Hyper-V hardware requirements. Question 55. For each statement below, indicate whether the answer is true or false. Deployment rings should be created in coordination with business stakeholders. True. All feedback from the pilot group should only come from IT engineers. Analytics data helps target future phases more effectively. True. Training is optional if a deployment completes without technical errors. False. Now let's break down why each statement is evaluated this way. To start, coordinating deployment rings with business stakeholders is essential because these groups understand peak activity periods, user availability, and business-critical processes. Their input ensures rollout timing aligns with operational needs. Next, feedback from the pilot group should never come only from IT engineers. End users provide real-world insights on usability, workflow impact, and adoption challenges, which are just as important as technical perspectives. Moving on, analytics data such as endpoint analytics helps identify device readiness, performance trends, and issues that could affect later deployment phases. This data-driven approach ensures smoother scaling. Finally, training is not optional simply because the deployment encountered no technical errors. Users still need guidance to adopt new features, follow new processes, and avoid productivity loss. Training supports successful change management and long-term adoption. Question 56. What are two characteristics of the Windows ADK as used in Configuration Manager? Select two answers. A. It enables the configuration of update groups and queries. B. It includes tools that generate Windows PE boot images. C. It is required to set up a configuration manager hierarchy. D. It replaces the need for deployment task sequences. E. It automates software deployment to mobile devices. The correct answers are B and C. Let's walk through why these two are correct. To begin, Windows ADK provides essential deployment tools, and one of the most important is the ability to generate Windows PE boot images. These WinPE images are required for operating system deployment in Configuration Manager, making option B a core function. Furthermore, setting up a configuration manager hierarchy requires the ADK because CM relies on its deployment and imaging components during installation. Without the ADK, key features simply wouldn't initialize properly, which is why option C is also correct. On the other hand, configuring update groups and queries happens entirely within Configuration Manager, not the ADK. Task sequences are still required for OS deployment, so the ADK doesn't replace them. And mobile software deployment is managed through Intune or CM capabilities, not directly through the ADK. This is why B and C stand as the correct answers. Question 57. For each statement below, indicate whether the answer is true or false. The All Users and User Groups collection includes both user and group objects from Active Directory. True. Built-in collections like All Users can be modified to narrow down membership. False. Collection membership for all desktop and server clients is maintained using Heartbeat Discovery. True. The Device Collections node is located in the monitoring workspace of the Configuration Manager console. Now I'm going to walk you through why each one is correct. To start, the All Users and User Groups collection really does merge user objects and group objects from Active Directory, allowing broad and unified targeting across users. Next, since built-in collections are locked and read-only, you can adjust or refine their membership, which is why that statement is false. Moving forward, Heartbeat Discovery actively maintains membership for the All Desktop and Server Clients collection by reporting client status on a recurring cycle. Finally, device collections actually live under Assets and Compliance rather than the monitoring workspace, so the last statement is false. That completes the explanation for question 57. Question 58. For each mitigation method, drag it to the appropriate box in the correct match column to match it with its description. Each item may be used once, more than once, or not at all. Uses shims to apply fixes and modify configuration. Compatibility Administrator, best long-term solution if a newer version is available. App Upgrade, allows use of legacy apps by isolating them from the main OS. Test Virtualization, enables temporary operation of apps by modifying access control settings. Security Configuration Change. Now I am going to explain why these answers are correct. First, Compatibility Administrator is the correct match for using shims because this tool lets you adjust file paths, registry entries, and other behaviors to keep older applications running smoothly. It's commonly used when legacy apps break due to newer Windows changes, making shims a practical short-term fix. Next, App Upgrade is the best long-term solution because updating to a supported version eliminates compatibility issues entirely. For example, if an older accounting app stops working after a Windows update, upgrading to its latest version ensures full vendor support and stability going forward. After that, virtualization fits perfectly for isolating legacy applications, since running them in a contained environment like Hyper-V prevents them from interfering with the host OS. This approach is especially useful when an app requires outdated components that aren't safe to install directly on modern systems. Finally, Security Configuration Change allows temporary operation by adjusting permissions or access rules. This is helpful when an application is blocked due to strict security settings and admins need a temporary workaround while preparing a more permanent fix. Together, these mappings reflect how organizations handle different types of application compatibility challenges in real-world environments. Question 59. Which two configuration options can Intune apply to apps after deployment? Select two answers. A. Apply a VPN gateway setting to force app-based tunneling. B. Specify a server address for an iOS app using app configuration policy. C. Configure website access restrictions using managed browser settings. D. Restrict app installation from the Apple App Store. The correct answers are B. Specify a server address for an iOS app using app configuration policy. And C. Configure website access restrictions using managed browser settings. Now let's break down why B and C are correct. To begin with, option B is valid because Intune app configuration policies are designed to push settings directly into managed apps. For an iOS app, that can include details like the server URL or API endpoint, so once the app is deployed, Intune can still inject or update that server address without the user touching anything. In a real environment, this means you can redirect an app from a test server to a production server just by changing the app configuration policy. In contrast, option C works because managed browser settings control which websites users can reach when they open links from managed apps. Intune can enforce allow lists or block lists and route traffic through a protected browser, so you are configuring connectivity behavior after the app is already on the device. For example, you might allow only your company's SharePoint and block social media sites when links are open from corporate email. On the other hand, option A deals with VPN profiles, not app configuration, so it is not considered an Intune app configuration change applied to the app itself. Likewise, option D is governed through Apple Business Manager and store controls, rather than being a post-deployment configuration setting inside the app via Intune. That is why the best choices for what Intune can configure on apps after deployment are B. Specify a server address for an iOS app using app configuration policy, and C. Configure website access restrictions using managed browser settings. Question 60. Which two conditions can prevent a Microsoft Store app from appearing in Intune's app search? Select two answers. A. The app has age restrictions. B. The app is licensed offline. C. The app is an Android application. D. The app is published by a third-party developer. The correct answers are A. The app has age restrictions, and C. The app is an Android application. Now let's walk through the explanation. To start with, option A is correct, because apps in the Microsoft Store that carry age-based restrictions may be hidden from Intune's catalog when those restrictions conflict with organizational compliance or content rating settings. For example, if your tenant restricts access to apps rated for mature audiences, Intune won't display them during the search. Next, option C is also correct since Intune cannot search for or deploy Android applications directly from the Microsoft Store. The Microsoft Store catalog is strictly for Windows apps, so anything designed for Android will never appear there. In practical terms, Android apps must be onboarded through Intune's dedicated Android app channels instead. However, option B does not prevent visibility. Offline licensed apps can still show up in Intune's search because offline licensing only affects how an app is activated, not how it is discovered. Similarly, option D does not hide an app by itself. Apps published by third-party developers remain visible as long as they're not restricted by permissions or compliance rules. That is why the correct answers are A. The app has age restrictions, and C. The app is an Android application.